Okay, welcome to podcast number 2. What do we tell our kids? When this time we're actually not going to be talking so much about kids, funnily enough, this early on in episode 2. Because I've had some stuff just recently and speaking to a couple of people and some parents. And what I want to talk about this week is parents. And mostly about how much of a hard time they give themselves. And let's be honest, how much of a hard time they get from society if they have a young person with special educational needs or behavioural difficulties or anything. And I've got some thoughts on it, and because it really frustrates me, the sheer amount of parents who ask for my help, and they've all got the same complex. They all believe that it's their fault in some way. Even if they've thought it through, they've talked it through with their partners or friends or even young people or professionals, they've still got that thing in their stomach that says, yeah, but it's me. And I'm just going to spend about 45 minutes rambling to try and convince you that it is not you, parents. It's not you. It's not anyone. It's not even the young person. Okay? It's something that I want to address. So what I want to say first of all is any parent or carer who has asked for help and gone out there and reached out to professionals, help in schools, psychologists, psychiatrists, people like me, sort of therapeutic education specialists, whatever, you've already shown just how much you care. If you had it your way, you would take away all of the difficulties that your child experiences in a snap. We know you would. Of course you would. And you would do absolutely anything to help them out. Now, what I want to talk about primarily, obviously, naturally, is the young people that struggle with school. And that's where their behaviours come out. And then a lot of times they'll bring that home as well. So you've got either people that can't access school because it's anxiety driven, whatever it may be, even back to last week with the bullying, and you've got people that can access school, but when they're there, they're a version of themselves that they wouldn't choose if they could, and they can't interact well, they can't get on with the structure of lessons, they can't get on with the social constructs of a school environment. And so that comes up a lot is parents to try desperately to say, how do I get my young person to school? And what I wanted to say on this point is, you as a parent from the word go have set out to do any and all things that would make your young person happy or happier or content or just in a better place today than they were yesterday. That's your whole raison d'etre. That's and you do everything that you possibly can to do that. So when you're hit head on with a conflict like school, so your young person, for whatever reason, behaviour, special requirements, whatever, says that they cannot go to school or they will not go to school, however you want to put it. Dilemma time. Because on the one hand, as you've shown your entire life and your entire interactions with your child, you want to do anything you can to make them happy, prosperous, content. On the other hand, your child is telling you, the one thing I need you to do for me in order to make me happy, prosperous, content, is tell me I don't have to go to school. I don't have to go to the place where my anxiety is out of control and I feel a quarter of myself. You've already run into this huge conflict. No education is good for my child. I know that constant stress and anxiety is bad for my child. How can you possibly begin to balance those two things out? That's not a question I can answer. Every parent is different. Every child is different. But just by acknowledging that absurdity of a contradiction, hopefully just by actually thinking about it for a second, it can give you some pause to think, oh yeah, that is a real significant contradiction and a real significant problem. I want to make my child happy. That's my reason for being. And I also want them educated and a constructive member of society. But in order to achieve that, I have to make them unhappy in this moment. And as we know, all children, more so than adults, they live in the moment. So what they're feeling then is their entire world. And then if you do that balancing act in your head and you say, right, well no, it's got to be education. They'll thank me one day. That creates even a bigger rift in the family. Because as far as they see it, it's needless torture. And then the behaviour escalates. And if the behaviour escalates, the reaction from the parent has to escalate, either positively or negatively. And a lot of the time negatively, by the way. That goes for me and that goes for every parent that I've ever worked with. That is natural. You are slamming an immovable object against an unstoppable force and feeling bad when nothing budges or nothing changes and that thing bubbles up in you to go, well, it has to be something I'm doing, then I'm doing something wrong. No, you are taking on an impossible task in the first place. And a lot of times it's a bit of luck to change that situation. But if you had a magic formula to combat this craziest of all contradictions of keeping your child happy by making them do the main thing that makes them unhappy, make sure you email me directly and let me know, and we'll both become millionaires, because that's a solution to an age-old problem that probably will never be solved ever. So at that very first stopping point of that contradiction, remind yourself just how much of a task that really is. You're a human being. Okay, and that takes me on to my next point. You're also not a teacher. I mean, some of you may be, but if you are a teacher, you're also not a lot of other things. And if you'd have wanted to become a teacher, you would have been. But you're not a teacher, and you're not a psychiatrist, and you're not a therapist, and you're not a counsellor, and you're not a dinner lady, and you're not so many things. You're a parent. Now, I know this. You see memes all the time, and it says, as a mum, I've got to be a nurse and a teacher and a mum and a dad, and it's true to a certain extent, and it's a lovely thought, but it's also not true in reality, is it? It's, if you wanted to be all of those things, you would need 1,000 lifetimes. So you have to be the best version of those things, makeshift in the moment as you possibly can. And as parents, we all juggle and wear 1,000 different hats throughout our parenting life and beyond. But if you had wanted to become those things, you would have done it. And I have no doubt that you who I'm talking to right now, would have done it extremely well. But that would have left blank spots that you don't know about because of the amount of time you spent to train to become a teacher or a doctor or a therapist or a psychiatrist or whatever. So in those moments, if you can't quite get your head around, well, why can't I access my young person? Why can't I convince them that education is the right thing for them? Why can't I convince them that school's not all that bad and it will serve them in the long run? Well, there are people, depending on how far down the line you get, for better or worse in these situations, who are paid high sums of money to try to crack that code and solve that problem. And as I speak to lots and lots of parents who are 2-3 years into this fight, and they are a dozen professionals in, none of which can solve the problem, it upsets me, and I would say it confuses me, but it doesn't, because I know it's human nature. But so I'll stick with that. It upsets me when I hear parents saying I should be able to do something. And again, another contradiction occurs, because they're smart enough, proactive enough and loving enough to reach out to the professionals who are supposed to be able to help. Now, help, not solve, bear in mind. So on the one hand, they're admitting they need help and they're doing everything a good parent should do, which is look for solutions or look for options at least. And then on the other hand, when things get really bad and some professionals fail, they tell themselves, what am I doing wrong then? This is my child, I should know them, I should be able to solve their problem. Well, then what were you wasting your time for asking for help in the first place? You knew when things perhaps weren't so bad and you weren't so stressed and you had a good day that day and you were in a place where you could think rationally and calmly and say, right, I need to look for some help. You knew in that moment that those aren't the things that you have practiced your entire life, so you need somebody who has in order to help you. But then stress occurs, doesn't it? Because something didn't quite go right, and the professional who you hoped and prayed would overcome the difficulties for your child or help them see a way out wasn't able to. So then those stress levels spike again. And God, I mean, stress levels, that will scramble your thinking like nothing else. If you want to think... If you don't want to think like yourself, get stressed and see what sorts of decisions you make and the horrible things that you tell yourself about yourself and about your situation. It's all clouded and muddled and usually wildly inaccurate. So if you are reaching out for help, then you already know that perhaps you're not in the best position to offer that help. Now, I've seen countless situations where things go from bad to worse. And the horrible thing about things going wrong is it's exponential, unfortunately. It's like a horrible, muddy snowball. Just the worse things get, the worse things can get, until that snowball is just a horrible, stinky, snowy sewage ball rolling down a hill with branches and dog poop sticking out of it. And when that snowball gets so big and unmanageable, you just let it roll and just let it accumulate more and more grime as it goes down. And then obviously stress levels spike and your thoughts get even more muddied and you go to blaming yourself. Why do you blame yourself? You blame yourself because you love your child more than anything you could ever love ever in the world 1,000 times over. Certainly more than you love yourself. So maybe in that muddled moment of high stress, you tell yourself, as long as I blame myself, I don't have to burden the person I love the most in the world with the stresses that are coming along with it. Because if I feel this way, how must my child feel? There's the human nature. There is the wonderful parent. There is the I will jump off a cliff to save you if I need to attitude that all of you have. Every single one of you are listening to this because you saw the title of this podcast and you tapped in. Maybe you thought, maybe I'll learn something. Maybe I'm just interested to hear this person's point of view. Who knows? But for whatever reason, it's for self-improvement, or it's for the benefit of your young person or whatever. So you are 100% that person. So it makes complete sense to me, which is why I said earlier, I didn't want to use the word confused, because I'm not confused. I understand it. I'm just upset. But you would, of course, you would feel that way. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying, let's put it in simple terms. Give yourself a break. All right. Your job is to be a parent. Your job is to love your child and do everything you possibly can to raise your child in the best way. Congratulations. Let me be the first, if nobody else has said it to you recently, to let you know that is exactly what you are doing for your child. Do not let perceived failures tell you any different. If your young person is one of the relative few in a population to struggle so significantly with issues at school and behaviour and special educational needs. I know there's a lot of young people out there who struggle, but I'm talking relatively. If they are one of those people, then things have been difficult for a long time. Right. Sorry, I tend to lose my train of thought when I'm rambling and passionate about something. But so let's think this through. Of course you're going to blame yourselves. That's only natural. But what I wanted to say in a nutshell is give yourself a break. Give yourself a damn break. All right, you aren't a teacher. You aren't a psychiatrist. It's not what you didn't go to university for 3 or 5 years. You didn't have an NQT year where you went home in tears some days because you didn't get it right. You didn't have a class full of 30 and feel so anxious and overwhelmed that you felt you could run out of a class. Then you didn't overcome those problems and learn exactly what you could do better in the future in order to stop that from happening. You didn't have moments with individual childs of all ages who you helped overcome, or that you feel you failed and you beat yourself up. You didn't go through the journey that you would require to even to begin to address the problems that you are trying to find solutions to. So don't lie to yourself in moments of stress and say that you did. Remind yourself that you didn't. Your job is to do exactly what you are doing, is trying to empower yourself so then you can empower your child however you can. There are young people that I work with who have been out of school for coming up 3 years, and unfortunately that happens. And I've seen in my work, whilst I've been in position to help as best I can, I've seen literally dozens of professionals come in, say, not my area of expertise, and leave. Come in, there's nothing more I can do for this young person, and leave. Come in and say, I'll refer them to so-and-so because I feel they would be better placed to help, and leave. Those professionals, they are able to do that because they are able to separate themselves from the young person. They don't have the investment and the deep connection that you do. So they can step back, see clearly, and say, I am wasting everyone's time and I could possibly be doing more damage than good by sticking around. So it's got to move on. It's not like these people are running and avoiding the problem. They have clarity of thought because they have a separation from the situation because they don't have the emotional connection. So don't let your emotional connection trick you into thinking that you are underperforming in any way or that you're not doing the job that you should be, because you are doing exactly what you should be doing. So what do we do? How do we remember that in times of crisis? I would do what a lot of you do first of all. And if you don't, I would suggest you do this. I would join groups, social media, obviously best way, WhatsApp groups, whatever you need to do. And I'd speak to people in similar situations that you're in. And any opportunity, if any of that has made sense to you, if any of that has struck a chord with you and hopefully made you feel better, take any opportunity you can to condense that down, because I know I go on, and remind somebody of that they are doing everything that they can. And to expect them to solve such a complex problem just through virtue of being their child's parent is crazy. It's harmful to you. And potentially harmful to the young person. I mean, let's talk about safety and where a child feels most safe. So, as we all know, I think, the reason a lot of the time behaviours are so much worse at home sometimes is because they feel safe at home. And they feel like they can offload all of the stresses and anxieties in a place where they feel safe. Now, it seems like a contradiction to you, and it seems painful and hurtful, I know, that the one person who loves them the most gets the brunt of the unwanted behaviours. But that's a young person trying to survive. As a young person doing exactly what he needs to do or she needs to do to get through the day and hopefully wake up tomorrow and have a fighting chance at trying something new. They're displaying all those behaviours not because they hate you or they want to cause you any pain. It's because that's what they have to do, and you show them all of the time, rightly, that you're willing to absorb anything in order to make them better. And then again, we're back to the original point of the question would always come then from that young person to say, well, then why won't you do this one thing? Why won't you say, I don't have to go to school anymore? You know, why do I have to go back to class then? Because you're doing everything. And God, try and find the language and the words to explain to them something that you don't truly know the answer to. It's impossible. And we're at another crossroads there where if you do have an answer, please let me know. And we'll both go and solve the world's ills together. So, yeah, speak to people, remind them that they're not everything. And if they were, then they would have no problems in the first place. And nor would their child, because they would have every miraculous answer to every problem going. Second, what would I do from there? Toughest question is do I take my child out of school? Again, there's no answer to that, unfortunately. It's all down to the individual child and the individual relationships you have with your child. What I would say is the key there is to be as receptive to what the reality is as you possibly can. I can't tell you how to do that, but I can tell you how I think you should best place yourself to do that. And that's to have a clear head. So, probably we've all been there, drunk, having a conversation. You got muddled thoughts. Maybe you're having a conversation, trying to give advice or trying to receive advice or just trying to have a coherent conversation. And your brain's completely muddled by the alcohol. Nothing comes out right, and you could end up in the morning getting a text saying you were really out of order last night, or you wake up yourself and think, oh God, what did I say? Well, it's because you weren't best placed to have that conversation. Now, let's take alcohol and let's replace it with high stress and tiredness and exhaustion. It's going to have the same effect. So especially when our kids are young, you can feel their emotions before they can, almost. You're so dialed into them. And then they become their own person, and naturally you give them space, and that's what you should do. But we always have that connection. But as stress and anxiety and worry builds up, that connection, that alcohol, blurs the lines, and it muddies the waters, and you tend to lose some sort of connection. And sometimes, let's be honest, straight frustration to the point where you're thinking, oh my God, I don't even like my own child right now. And God, let guilt flood in there. Please don't do that. Don't let guilt flood in. Everybody feels that way from time to time. So, yeah, when those thoughts happen, you have to place yourself or orientate yourself to a position where you can be free of stress and worry in order for you to heal your child again. So the difficult question of, do I take my child out of school? Is it doing them more damage to be there rather than to just persevere and stiff upper lip it? Well, I don't know that. And you don't know that right now, which is why you're listening, but you may be able to get closer to the answer if you're in a position to hear correctly. And in order to be in a position to hear correctly, you need to give yourself a goddamn break. You need to be able to de-stress yourself in order to hear your child again and look into their eyes and say, okay, I can see it. This is damaging you, and you need a break. You need an alternative place to go. You need an alternative way to do things. Or you could say, I can hear you now. I'm de-stressed. I'm not blaming myself for all these problems. I'm not winding myself into a knot. And I can see that all you need is a hug, a slap on the back, and to say, let's get through it. We can get through it together. We can go and get a hobby and build up our confidence that way, or whatever. But if you can't hear them because you're too busy listening to the screaming anxiety screams and shouts of your own brain, then you're going to limit the chance to really dial in to what it is they need. Now, I'm not trying to put any pressure on you to be able to read your child's mind. I know that's impossible. But what I'm saying is give yourself a better chance by not flipping that anxiety and stress switch right from the start to say, it's all my fault, it's all my fault. Then you've just started the snowball. Remind yourself it's not. Oh, the other thing I really wanted to talk about, because God help me, it gripes me, is the social impact of having a young person with significant special educational needs, behavioural difficulties, and the judgment that we get sometimes, me included. My son is on the spectrum, and certainly early doors, the sorts of meltdowns we had in public and at school, you get those busybodies who look disapprovingly and shake their head and make you feel even worse than you already do in that moment. It's easy to say, but just forget those people. Pretend they're not there. Ignore them completely. I would say don't even engage with them, because as soon as you engage with them, because my wife, I hope she don't mind me saying, but we had my son have meltdowns in the street, and if anybody knows my wife out there, it won't surprise you, but she's the first one to go at it and call the person out for tutting and shaking their head at them, as when we're in the 6th meltdown of the week. But all that does is it just spikes adrenaline, and it causes more stress in the body and in the mind, and you put yourself in a worse position. I'd just say just give them what they're due, which is nothing at all. All right, they don't understand. They have never been there, which is why they're tutting and shaking their head and judging you, and why they're saying that horrible thing that, please, if you're listening here and you don't have any young people with difficulties in school or socially or at home or whatever, and you've never experienced it, please never say this to a parent. Just leave them with me for 2 weeks. I'll sort them out. Please don't say that. Please don't say that. It's the worst thing you could possibly say to a parent. It's ugly, it's presumptuous, and it's completely off base. That is a no-no to ever say to a parent with a child who has special educational needs. Leave that aside. So, yeah, that horrible judgment is a real difficult thing. Certainly don't engage with it online, and it's not fair in the slightest. If they knew the solution, once again, they would be in a position to fix all of these problems. So if you ever feel convinced of what the person's saying to you, I'd sort them out. I wouldn't have that. Oh, if they were having a meltdown, I'd whip them into shape nice and quick. Okay. If you are in a high level of stress, you're feeling down, your self-esteem is low, and you manage that little ugly earworm to get into your head and start eating away at your brain, okay, that happens. That's fine. But then remind yourself, then that person probably a selfish arsehole. Because if they have the secrets of the universe for some of our most vulnerable people in the world, and they're keeping it to themselves, they're not bothering to shout it from the rooftops or go to university where they can get their qualification to help every single young person who's ever suffered a meltdown before. If they're not doing that, if the best they can do with all this secret knowledge that they have is shake their head and judge you in that moment, then even if you believe it, at least appreciate that they're a selfish arsehole who will not share this secret information. So if you can't remind yourself that they just don't know and they're being ignorant, then, play along. Pretend they do have the secrets and recognise the arsehole that's standing in front of you. It's pretty much all I've got to say on that. It's as simple as that. When I realised that as a younger parent, God, it made me feel better. Because everyone knows everything these days without having to do anything, apparently. With Google, even if they don't know everything immediately, they can go and do 8 years of research in a single Google search. So, It's the absurdity of it it doesn't even bear thinking about. The other thing I wanted to talk about is this idea. It comes up all the time. Recently, an interview I did, it came up, and the person said, "What do you say to parents who, to the people who say that it's the parents' fault?" What is the parents' fault? For heaven's sake, what are you talking about? It's a complete non-starter. What is the parents' fault? Most of the time, the houses that I go to or the schools that I visit or whatever, the parent has been the one to make that leap and ask for help, which is way more mature than anybody who would say it's the parents' fault that their kid is that way, first of all. But second of all, I go to most families and they have 2-3 other siblings, and for want of a better phrase, the other kid's just fine. I'm not saying that the young person with difficulties isn't fine. I'm just being colloquial at the moment, but all is well. They operate well at school, like 95% of other young people. They get on just fine. They have a happy home life because they don't have the learning difficulty or the emotional difficulty that the other young person was born with. Now, we've set up an entire society, naturally and understandably, for the 95% of people. It would almost be foolish not to, right? But what that does mean is that you set up such intricate systems to serve the 95% in the best way possible that if you're unlucky enough to be in the 5%, you're already stepping in behind. You're starting the race from 50 yards back, and then nothing changes when you're there, especially if you're a young person with difficulties in a mainstream school. Nothing changes around you. The environment doesn't change, so you exist now in an environment that wasn't set out for you in the first place, that other people are responding well to because it's designed for them, and you can't interact correctly with the things around you because it wasn't built for you. So now, 9 times out of 10, emotionally or academically, you're moving slower, but you don't have the maturity or the intelligence at that age to even realise that that's the case. So your frustration grows. I mean, that is what frustration is, isn't it? Frustration is not knowing why a thing is happening to you. Because if you knew, then there's no frustration. And a lot of young people most young people go one of 2 ways, don't they? They blame themselves and they say, well, I'm not good enough. That's why. That could be the only reason why. Wouldn't occur to them naturally to blame their environment or say, well, if we structured school in this way and if they catered for me in this way, great, we've got somebody who can also solve it. But of course they can't. They're a child. And then you get the young people who react to that same environmental issue with anger and violent frustration and shouting and meltdowns, and because the frustration, just like the stress for you parents who feel like they should be able to solve the problems in a snap, their frustration comes out, but they're supported by you who loves them so much, who says, I'll keep you safe. They're supported. So they can't do what you do and internalize everything so severely. It has to come out in some way. If it comes out negatively in terms of saying this is my fault, they're not like you yet. They can't ask for help. They don't know where to ask for help. They just lose self-esteem and self-confidence, and depression sets in. And when depression sets in, anxiety sets in. And when anxiety sets in, everything spirals. And they swallow themselves whole, and no wonder they can't leave their bedroom. And then you get the more rambunctious youngster who has a different genetic makeup, And instead of going inwards, they go outwards and they explode. And then what happens from there? The problems exacerbate, of course, and it becomes a less manageable situation, and things spiral further out of control. And again, lost my train of thought, but my overall point, I think, was that these young people are already behind the curve from the start, which is horrible. So maybe that's something as well to consider when you ask yourself the question, do I take them out of school? Do I look for an alternative? Maybe that is a realistic question you should ask yourself. So would it be better to cut losses? You got the gambler's fallacy that you always need to consider. Gambler's fallacy being, if I were playing poker and I've got 1,000 chips and I bet and I've gone through the whole hands and suddenly I've got 650 of my chips in the pot and only 450 left. Now the gambler's fallacy, and it's a human error that we all make, it's a well-known psychological concept, is that you've invested so much that it's not worth folding and losing the 650 chips. You might as well now go all in and risk losing because you'd only have 450 chips left. And that gambler's fallacy, it infects your mind and it gets into all of us. And it's the same with school. So you might be saying, well, I'm invested in school. I trusted the system. We're now in year 8 and it's so close to GCSE, or if I take them out, I'll lose everything. Well, no, remember, sometimes if you're smart enough, if you've got over half your chip stack in poker in on the table, you've got the 650 on the table, if you fold then and you don't lose and go all in, you can take those 450 chips back and you can rebuild if you're lucky enough, if you're skilled enough, if you're paying enough attention. At least you've got a fighting chance. So if you get that far into school, and the only thing stopping you from making the decision to say, I need to find something that suits my young person better, I need to find an environment that actually makes sense, where we can start making progress rather than going backwards, then combat that gambler's fallacy immediately and make a decision based on what you know to be right. Accept what you perceive as losses, lost time in school and all the efforts you put in. Okay, but it's not working. So take your 450 and rebuild. Something to consider. Also you could throw your chips in and go for it. Who knows? Could come up as a big win. But never tell yourself that you have to because you've come this far. If school's not working and you can see your young person, their situation worsening, then they're going backwards, it might be time to fold and try something new. Plus, trying something new sometimes can be the reset that a child needs. Could be the reset that you need. And maybe, if nothing else in this podcast, your reset today is going to be, this is the moment I stop being silly with myself and telling myself I should be all things at all times, because you can't be, and it's ludicrous to think you can. All right, you're not 1,000 different professionals all at once. So maybe that's your reset button today, to say, I'm actually going to accept that I am a parent without expertise. You didn't, if we were all given the choice before we made a decision to have a young person, I would imagine that every human being's child would be composed emotionally, intellectually, as stable and as happy and as confident and as blah 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 as everybody else's. They would all be the same. Because not to say for a damn second that you would change your child as they are right now, but if you had it from the start, you had the option from the start to say, what would I want in an ideal world for my child? It would be all of those things. It certainly wouldn't be the difficulties that you can see are emotionally crippling your child. So you didn't ask for any of it. You didn't willingly put yourself in that position, and you're doing everything you can to help improve the quality of your child's life. So yeah, use that as a reset button today. That I'm gonna do what I do best, which is be a loving parent, be patient, and hope, and keep trying and changing environments and looking for professionals who can help, and trying my best to reduce my stress and actually hear my child as best I possibly can. None of this is quick fixes, but hopefully it makes you feel just a little bit better. Okay, this is a topic that I could talk about for a long time, I think, but I think for today I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm thinking about doing some parent groups at Upgrade. So let me know if that's something you'd like. Hit me up on social media. Leave a comment. The idea that I have is to basically just lead us a conversation between us all, and I don't want to. I've been to a lot of those sessions, by the way, and what always concerns me about those sessions, and holler if you recognise what I'm saying, it sometimes can turn into an I'm better than you show, and I think that can be really dangerous sometimes, because I've seen a whole group of people, and then you have 2 or 3, 4, 5 maybe who seem to be competing for, oh well, I do that very well, I know how to solve that, and instantly somebody who's come in with low self-esteem and feeling exhausted by the current situation that they're in, it hammers them down again to another thing that I'm not doing right, thanks very much. I want to create an environment, if I can, where we actually all do get together and we just talk about the difficulties that we're experiencing, and we do our best to assure the people who are there that they're doing just fine, and the very fact of them being there shows that they are doing just fine, and not just fine, actually they're doing everything that they can. So it's almost like a support group, almost, if you want to call it that, but we can just talk about things, and hopefully in my area of expertise in terms of education and structuring environments that foster positive behaviour change, I can throw my 2 cents in and offer little bits that you might want to try. If it works, if it doesn't, it doesn't. But just a non-judgmental environment where we can all just, if nothing else, just come and piss and moan and blow off a bit of steam. Remind ourselves that we're good people who are doing everything that we possibly can to help the people that we love the most. So if that's something you would want me to look into putting on for you all, there's nothing I'd love to do more. We can do that once a week, twice a week, whatever anybody needs. I'd be really interested in doing that, because, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, this is an area that really drives me nuts. It's unfair. You're taking some of the, and this is you're taking some of the highest stressed, most kindest, caring, empathetic, greatest people on the planet and victimizing them, and having the nerve to say that they're doing something wrong. And then the awful knock-on is that those people are usually so kind and receptive and empathetic that they're the sort of people that absorb it and believe it and say, yeah, you're right, I can see it, my child's so upset, you're telling me I'm wrong, so I must be. Well, if this podcast or a support group does nothing more than to metaphorically throw cold water on your face and say stop that immediately, then great, because it's not true. Just by listening to this, you've proved that. Everything that you do from a day to day proves that. And if you do have lapses, by the way, do things you regret, say things you regret, shout, scream, cry, collapse, whatever, yeah, that is human. I've done it, my wife's done it, You've probably done it, and everybody listening to this has probably done it because you're human, right? That doesn't negate the other 99% of good work and good intentions that you do and have at all other times. Give yourselves a break. And if you need a bigger break, come and get a break from everybody at a potential social group we put on. Your young person will be an adult one day, and I promise you, if you lower your stress and you continue to love them, they will be the best possible adult that they can be given their circumstances. Not a huge promise, I know, but it's something. And today is not always going to be today. Tomorrow may be worse, but the next day might be better. And 6 months from now might be utopia. Who knows? Stay positive. Stop blaming yourselves. There's enough, as we know, people out there to do that for you. And then when they do, don't listen to them. Ignore them. And accept that they might just be arseholes. Right. I do want to talk about this more, so hit me up some questions. I'll answer all of them if I can get to them. Cheers, guys. And I'll see you next week.